Oh, right, yeah. We did a couple of Peter Hitchens. I quite like Peter Hitchens, but everyone said do Christopher Hitchens. But I have a feeling, just from what people, I don't even know how Peter Hitchens come off. I think someone just commented it. But yeah, I have a feeling I'm going to be more Peter Hitchens. Um, yeah, but I don't know because I've not actually seen him. That's only kind of gauging from what people have said. Um, but yeah, Christopher Hitchens, the best of the Hitchslap. Yeah, let's go.
Now, I am absolutely convinced that the main source of hatred in the world is religion and organized religion. Absolutely convinced of it. And I think it should be religion treated with ridicule and hatred and contempt. And I claim that right.
So when I say, as the subtitle of my book, that I think religion poisons everything, I'm not just doing what publishers like and coming up with a provocative subtitle. I mean to say it infects us in our most basic integrity. It says we can't be moral without Big Brother, without a totalitarian permission. It means we can't be good to one another. It means we can't think without this. We must be afraid. We must also be forced to love someone who we fear. The essence of sadomasochism. The essence of abjection. The essence of the master-slave relationship. And that knows that death is coming and can't wait to bring it on. I say this is evil. And though I do some nights stay home, I enjoy more the nights when I go out and fight against this ultimate wickedness and ultimate stupidity. Is it not the case that the spread of Christianity, about which you spoke so warmly and affectingly in your opening remarks, attributing it to the innate truth of the Bible story, was spread by that means, or because the Emperor Constantine decided to make Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire? Which, in your view, contributed more to the spread of the faith?
The Holy Spirit.
I rest my case. You give me the awful impression, I hate to have to say it, of someone who hasn't read any of the arguments against your position ever.
So what if God actually exists, sir? Would he not...
To be fair, about the thing, that's a good point, that would it be as big if the Romans didn't accept it? But you have to remember that, was it Constantine? Which is why you can argue Catholicism is not really Christian and more pagan. Because, yeah, the reason why the Roman Empire become Christian was because the people was becoming. So that does kind of, yeah, granted, once the Roman Empire took it and conquered the world, whatever, you can argue that but the reason Rome became Christian in the first place was because the people was fleeing Rome, and it was kind of a last ditch effort for, I'm sure it was Constantine, that kind of went, no, I am Christian, really, come back, basically. So yeah, that's a bit of a chicken and an egg thing.
been good to you?
No. He wouldn't. Because if that were true, it would mean that I had an eternal supervising parent who would never die and let me get on with my life, never let me grow up, would keep me under surveillance.
But you have, sir.
And supervision every minute of my life,
but you
constantly asked me to be thanking and praising him.
Yeah.
I think it would
that
be
wasn't part
like,
of the
it would be
scenario.
like living in North Korea. I think it would be a horrible outcome.
Well, not sure that God is Kim Jong-il, but what if what I said is true?
Well, ask Kim Jong-il, he has a different opinion.
Let's say that the consensus is that our species, we being the higher primates, Homo sapiens, has been on the planet for at least 100,000 years. In order to be Christian, you have to believe that for 98,000 years, our species suffered and died, most of its children dying in childbirth, most other people having a life expectancy of about 25, dying of their teeth, famine, struggle, bitterness, war, suffering, misery, all of that for 98,000 years. Heaven watches it with complete indifference. And then 2,000 years ago thinks, that's enough of that. It's time to intervene. The best way to do this would be by condemning someone to a human sacrifice somewhere in the less literate parts of the Middle East. Let's appeal to the Chinese, for example, where people can read and study evidence and have a civilization. Let's go to the desert and have another revelation there. This is nonsense. It can't be believed by a thinking person. If it was true, it would have two further implications. It would have to mean that the designer of this plan was unbelievably lazy and inept, or unbelievably callous and cruel and indifferent and capricious. And that is the case with every argument for design and every argument for revelation and intervention that has ever been made. All of this could be part of a plan. There is no way an atheist can prove it's not. But it's some plan, isn't it, with mass destruction, pitiless extermination, annihilation going on all the time, and all of this set in motion on a scale that's absolutely beyond our imagination, in order that the Pope can tell people not to jerk off. In his comment, one of the few he's made, on the institutionalization of rape and torture and maltreatment of children in Catholic institutions, he has said, it's a very severe crisis which involves us, he said, in the following: in the need for applying to these victims the most loving pastoral care. Well, I'm sorry. They've already had that. The rape and torture of children is not something to be relativized. It's not something to be excused as a few bad priests. It's the crime that cries out for punishment. It's the thing that if...
Now, Christopher, you obviously sound like you're from a very... Yeah. You've gone to some type of university. Now, you could be working class, but it doesn't sound like it. So, you will know that the Catholic Church, and I'm not Catholic, and this isn't defending them priests, but that goes on at the highest levels of our government. Now, people can go, oh, it's a conspiracy. It's not. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's 100%. Multiple ex-police officers have lost their careers for trying to expose this sort of thing. We saw it with Jimmy Savile, Epstein. Look at Epstein's island list. Like, it's high-level people in governments and whatever that are all involved. Like, to pick on the Catholic Church, which there is definitely a problem with the Catholic Church. I have a problem with organised religion overall, but yeah, if you're going to be honest about child abuse, you cannot say it just goes on there. It goes on everywhere in the public schools, children's homes, and there's the police. There's no effort on the police half to stop it. Do you know what I mean? Like, but yeah. So if you're gonna bring in the child thing to do with the Catholic Church, you've got to be honest to the fact that it's way more widespread than just the Catholic Church. Like that's something I can 100% back someone for being anti. But yeah,
we were accused of on this side of the House, we would die rather than admit. And if we were guilty of it, would kill ourselves.
Your view would be the same as mine, that child sacrifice is reprehensible, would it not?
Did Abraham think child sacrifice was an okay idea?
He obeyed God and God intervened. The ultimate question is, does God think child sacrifice, since he sent his own son to be the ultimate sacrifice?
Well, he appears to be in favor of it.
He does appear to be in favor of it, but in context.
You and I agreed that we were not. I'm asking.
It's not scorning the three delightful children who are everything to me and who are my only chance of even a glimpse of a second life, let alone an immortal one. And I'll tell you something, if I was told to sacrifice them to prove my devotion to God, if I was told to do what all monotheists are told to do, and admire the man who said, yes, I'll gut my kid to show my love of God, I'd say, no, fuck you. What about Fräulein Freisel in Austria, whose father, unwilling to get out of the way, kept her in a
dungeon where she didn't see daylight for 24 years and came down most nights to rape and to sodomize her, often in front of the children who were the victims of the previous attacks and offenses. Imagine how she must have begged him. Imagine how she must have pleaded. Imagine for how long. Imagine how she must have prayed every day, how she must have beseeched heaven. Imagine, for 24 years, and no answer at all. Nothing. Now, you say that's all right that she went through that, because she'll get a better deal in another life? I have to ask you if you can be morally or ethically serious and postulate such a question. No, that had to happen, and heaven did watch it with indifference, because it knows that score will later on be settled. So it was well worth her going through it. She'll have a better time next time. I don't see how you can look anyone in the face, or live with yourself and say anything so hideously, wickedly immoral as that, or even imply it. There, that's my answer.
Do you believe that God, if he's provided everything for you, has rights on your life?
No.
Because?
Why should he? What gives him this right?
Because he owns you. He's created everything for you. He's kept you alive.
I don't want to be owned. I don't want to be owned, and I don't recognize anyone's right to own me.
So ownership is a bad thing?
Of people, yes.
Oh, okay.
It's been widely considered. I mean, I know the Bible does call for slavery, as it calls for genocide, but that doesn't make it right.
It is a horrible idea that there is somebody who owns us, who makes us, who supervises us, waking and sleeping, who knows our thoughts, who can convict us of thought crime, thought crime, just for what we think, who can judge us while we sleep for things that might occur to us in our dreams, who can create us sick, as apparently we are, and then order us on pain of eternal torture to be well again. To demand this, to wish this to be true, is to wish to live as an abject slave.
You've made the worst concession already. You've already said you're a slave. So,
well, absolutely.
After that, mere obedience to orders is a small offense.
I readily admit that I'm a slave. I'm a slave of the Lord Jesus Christ.
I'm glad of your chains.
Yeah. Well. Well,
What about the most important minority in the history of the world? Those who have never believed in God, those who believe that an ethical life is possible without religion. We have to be insulted and outraged every day by what we see and what we read. By slaughter and murder. Slaughter and murder and barbarism and insult and superstitious nonsense. We do not reply in kind. We don't say, we'll go and kill you if you go on insulting us like this. Do we get no credit for saying this? When has anyone ever said, what's it like to be insulted as someone who thinks that civilization's a real thing? Why is it always interfaith? Why is it always interdenominational? Why can't we say that all of these cults are equal and equivalent glimpses of the untrue? I know what's coming. I know no one beats these up.
There's another thing as well. He's used the term cult there a couple of times. And I saw someone who actually studied cults, because that's something that Joe Rogan says, what's the difference between a cult and a religion, really? But this guy who kind of, I think he's just a journalist that kind of took an interest into different, and he's kind of stayed with every cult and that I suppose that would let him. But he said the difference between that and a religion is that with Christianity, you learn day one what the story of Jesus. Like, it's not pay me 50,000 and then you reach the next level and we'll tell you the next bit, which is what happens with cults. There's always a secret bit of information that you've got to build up to. A bit like the psychology that's gripped people playing computer games. But yeah, that's the difference between a cult and a religion. Like, you can't call a religion a cult because day one, you know Jesus died on the cross. You know he died on the cross for your sins. Do you know what I mean? You know it all. Like, you know it all. So yeah, it's not the same thing. I suppose it can be used in the same way, but then so can anything. What's that singer from that band? Was it the Lost Prophets who was getting his fans to give him his babies to molest, right?
And it's a matter of getting used to that and growing up and realizing that you're expelled from your mother's uterus as if shot from a cannon towards a barn door studded with old nail files and rusty hooks. It's a matter of how you use up the intervening time in an intelligent and ironic way, and try not to do everything ghastly to your fellow creatures. I think it will one day be admitted with shame that it might have been in error to say that AIDS is bad as a disease, very bad, but not quite as bad as condoms are bad, or not as immoral in the same way. I say it in the presence of His grace, and I say it to His face. The preachings of His church are responsible for the death and suffering and misery of millions of his brother and sister Africans, and he should apologize for it. He should show some shame.
There's another immoral injunction. Go love your own enemies. Don't be loving mine. My enemies are the theocratic fascists. I don't love them. I want to destroy them.
For condemning my friend Stephen Fry for his nature, for saying you couldn't be a member of our church. You're born in sin. He's not being condemned for what he does. He's being condemned for what he is. You're a child made in the image of God. Oh, no, you're not. You're a faggot. And you can't join your church and you can't go to heaven. This is disgraceful. It's inhuman. It's obscene. And it comes from a clutch of hysterical, sinister virgins who've already betrayed their charge in the children of their own church.
I would posit to you, Christopher, that there is no fundamental difference between what the Israelites did to the Amalekites and their surrounding neighbors or enemies than what the United States did justly in going into Iraq. Whether we did it principally for moral reasons, it certainly had a moral...
Can you possibly for 1 second be morally serious as a human being and say that?
Well, yes, I can.
We fulfill what Iraqis did we exterminate? What Iraqis did we enslave? What Iraqi virgins did we keep for our soldiers, having killed the rest of their families?
Well,
what are you talking about, sir?
But
that's what I said.
You took up all the time for my answer with your long, rather unlettered question. If you want to get good people to do wicked things, you need religion. What do I mean by that? I mean to say that when they see a newborn baby arriving in their life, if anyone's ever thought, even myself, well, maybe there is something to this. Look at the perfection of this little bundle. But they said, I tell you what, though, before we go any further, we need to get a sharp knife or a stone from somewhere and start hacking away at the genitalia of this little bundle. Because if we don't, we won't be doing God's will. Now, no moral person would do such a thing unless they thought it was divinely warranted.
Christopher, I've got to call you down on referring to circumcision as genital mutilation. My son cried more at his first haircut than he did at his bris. And statistically...
You weren't doing it right, then.
Statistically, the only long-term effect that it seems to have on people is it increases their chances of winning a Nobel Prize.
I can't find the compulsory mutilation of the genitals of children a subject for humor in that way, or flippancy in that way. What if a Muslim was to say to you just now, my little girl cried more at her first haircut than when I cut off her clitoris? What would you think of me if I was to say such a disgusting thing? That a person as humane as yourself can sit here and think of that as a fit subject for humor shows what I mean. Religion makes morally normal people say and do disgusting and wicked things, and you've just proved my point for me.
Well, I want to make it clear in our closing moments here, Christopher. I don't consider you an enemy. I don't consider you...
But I'm very sorry to hear that.
Well, I know, because you want me to be your enemy.
Excuse me, you are my enemy.
Well, but you're not my enemy.
How you can figure that?
No, because I don't feel a need to have to silence Christopher Hitchens.
Well, you don't have a chance of doing that. I don't mean that at all, but I mean your preachments are evil and they're a direct threat to the survival of civilization. So if you don't consider me an enemy, you don't know an enemy when you see or hear one.
The argument for theism, that not only can we establish this prime mover's existence, but we can show by some form of induction that he intervenes in wars, that he answers prayers, that he cares who we sleep with and in what position, that what food we eat and on what days, is a ridiculous proposition. It's a claim to a truth that no primate can claim to make. Primates who claim to know it should be distrusted. Great damage has been done and continues to be done by such people and by such ideas. You're better off thinking for yourself and taking all the risks, and I might add, all the pleasures that will come from that. The most overrated of the virtues is faith. The metaphysical claims of religion are untrue. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with him on some things, but disagree with him with others, because I've had that argument about the cutting off of the foreskin of, yeah, because I remember going on on some course, and one of the parts of the course was to do with things like that, and one of it was female genital mutilation. And I brought up the fact of what's the difference. Now the way that they say the difference between chopping off the foreskin and is that it doesn't impair the thing that you're slicing it off of. You can still use it. But at the same time, you're taking a knife to a baby and cutting a piece off. Now, like, why is it any different? Like, I have that same thing in my head. I remember, and then the mate, he didn't really have, because I asked, I was like, well, what's the difference between that? And that's what he said. Well, I was like, yeah, but you're still cutting something off of a human being without its permission. Now, it's a baby, it can't give permission. Well, how about let's just leave things where they are then? And also, if you believe in God, then you got to believe that that foreskin is there for a very good reason. That God made it like for a reason. But I do disagree with him on other things, like when he said you can go and learn your own things. I don't believe that as true. That you can just go and figure your own things out, because the Bible. I agree with everything he said about organized religions, and yeah, I think that if you're telling people they can't be this and they can't be that, really, I think, although I'm listening to the rest of the Bible now, the Gospels of Jesus are really what you need to focus on, right? That's the guy. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think personally, the stories in the Bible are kind of they're fundamental truths. Um, which you say the Bible is not true and you can't prove it's true, but there's other things that aren't physically, scientifically provable as true, but are true, metaphysically true. Aesop's fables and things like that. Now, I think personally that the Bible is a bit like that. Like, there's a lot of things in the Bible that are life lessons. Um, if you look at it from a psychology angle, as if the like the whole book is a description of a human being or the psychology of a human. Yeah, but you can't just go out and do like what you want and just have a load, as great as it would be, because the truth is there's idiots in the world, like, and the things that you're saying about, well, if there's a God, then why does this thing happen, why does that thing happen, and God sat by and watched this happen. But one, that it's not God doing that, it's people doing that. And this is the thing where both Christians and atheists fall down, right? Now let's take atheist, seeing as he's obviously atheist. If you're an atheist and you believe all we are is just a bunch of bits and bobs chemically reacting together, making us think and react and whatever in a certain way because that's how we're chemically programmed, right? If you think that's true and your kid dies, then why would you be upset? And same goes for a Christian. If you believe, if your kid dies and you believe now that kid died at 5, why are you upset about it then? Because he's gonna be with God. Obviously God didn't want him to go through life and the shit life that it is really. And pluck them out early. So a Christian should be happy, but also an atheist should be indifferent because all it is really is just a bunch of bits and bobs. Right? There's just a bunch of chemicals formed together, like as a bunch of atomic force. Like, why would it's no different to having a car if your kid dies? Do you know what I mean? You just get a new one. Like, just have a new one. Like, it falls down, and humans have a. I think Russell Brand hit the nail on the head. I see a little short of Russell Brand, and he said it's probably not his idea, but he said that humans are a creature that is designed to worship something. And if you go back through history, there's always been gods, and do you know what I mean? And the fact that just by removing religion doesn't remove the actual like that want to worship, and then when you don't have something kind of holy to worship, you're going to end up worshiping celebrities, which is what you're seeing. We have in England the belief, and that's what another thing I think when he said that religion is the cause of all, that is the most hate-filled thing, and blah blah blah. It's like, well, England hasn't been religious for as long as I've been here. My whole life, England's not religious. My family aren't religious. People find it hard to believe that England's not religious, but we're really not. We're a Christian country by laws and things, but we're not a Christian country in terms of its people. No one goes to church. Do you know what I mean? I mean, you might get some old people that do or whatever, but it's a very, very, very small group of people in England that go to church. And look at all the violence that's like. This, look at things like the knife crime. Do you know what I mean? I think London overtook New York for the amount of deaths for the first time ever. Like, or for the first time in years or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And they ain't doing it for religious reasons. It's over money. Like there's other things that I think you can pick on. But then I do agree with him on like on religion's need or religious people's need to kind of condemn. But then that can also come with atheists too. Like, yeah. And the fact of the matter is, this is what I say with all these people that kind of attack the Bible. The Bible is a fascinating thing for the fact that it's lasted as long. And you can't say that that's because governments have wanted to use it for control, because nothing lasts that long like that. But I can guarantee you, in 2,000 years, people ain't going to be reading Christopher Hitchens' books. I mean, maybe they will, but I doubt that very much. Do you know what I mean? There'll be, probably won't even be such thing as books then. Maybe there won't be such thing as religion then. Like, who knows? But the because that's the other thing. I think people look at the Bible and see religion in terms of over a lifetime. Over your lifetime is what matters, and it's not like. And I think religion is something that kind of maintains when everything else falls. And then the other thing is, I mean, this isn't not saying that religious people do bad things in the name of their religion, but there's a lot of I watch a lot of like ex-criminals, like, and I'm talking the most vicious, brutal people that just have some. Now, whether you say it's true or it happened, or they just had some psychological kink one day that, but you'll see multiple people that was brutal, that have done brutal things to people their whole life, all of a sudden have an experience with a religion or whatever. They just have some experience that just takes them to God. Now, I don't know anything that can kind of have that effect other than like a kid. That can change people when they have a baby and they hold that thing, like this little tiny thing in their hand. But yeah, yeah. And that's another thing as well when he talks about condoms and things. I think you're picking now, if his fight is against organized religion, which it does seem, a lot of the things he seems to say, but then some of it's not. Some of it's kind of, I think his trouble is he's too kind of, um, he's looking at it too materialistically and its function in that kind of, yeah, materialistic sense, which the Bible isn't that. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of kind of, and also there's a lot of things there's a lot of brutal things in the Bible, but there's things that's very way more advanced than what you'd think people would be thinking 2,000 years ago. But yeah, I'd actually like listening to this. I think he's dead now. No, Christopher Hitchens, but I listen to people like this. I think I'd love to like not really debate, but kind of just throw things up for them and see and take their like, yeah, not like even in a way to change the person's mind, but just to like, yeah, because I think in them kind of little where you go up and you stand and you speak for 5 minutes, I'd rather have someone like Christopher Hitchens on, like, say, Joe Rogan's show, where it's 3.5 hours. You can talk to him, and you can, rather than these things where they go up and basically say their speech, or maybe do a hour of a Q&A, but really, do you know what I mean? You're not going into depth into things. You're just kind of saying things because the next person wants to answer. You know what I mean? Like, but I'd love to have got Christopher Hitchens, and yeah, that's the thing with Peter Hitchens. I kind of more feel like I more line up with his way of thinking, but someone like Christopher Hitchens is more someone I'd think I'd like if he was alive and I was a podcaster, he'd be the person, like people like him I'd want to get on and kind of slow him down a bit and go, right, you said this, and this, and go like expand on that. Do you know what I mean? Go deeper on that. Yeah, it would be fascinating. But yeah, yeah, that's the reaction. Sweet.